Hi, you guys. Welcome to Coffee Hour. I'm sorry I'm a couple minutes late. It's been kind of like a chaotic Saturday morning around here, and I've already done so much today. It's like insane. I hope you guys are doing okay. We had so many questions on the feed, and I don't know, you guys. We're going to get to as much as we can today. I have a word of warning, like kind of before we begin, which just feels like it needs to be reiterated, and it's something that I've been saying like all week, basically. But I feel like I need to say here again. I feel like my hair is a disaster today, which is this. Okay, we truly don't know at this point how so much of this stuff is going to play out. All right. And one of the things that just always makes me nervous whenever I'm looking at the feed for Coffee Hour and it feels chaotic, which is how it felt to me today, is that I think that a lot of us are like spinning out as an attempted coping mechanism from the current state of what we're living through. And the prime example of this, and I'm not giving anybody shade, please don't mistake me in this way, but the primary example of this morning was that someone was on there. I'm going to turn off this light. It's too bright. Someone was on there this morning saying, I'm imagining what Trump's first executive order is going to look like, and it's going to require there to be fealty to Trump above the Constitution. And then what do we do about that? And, I just have to say, like, we really don't know. And again, like, this has been the message that I've been sending to you all since my father gave me the same talking to the day after the election. We really don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I don't want to diminish the fact that we are in a significant amount of danger. All right. But it doesn't really serve anyone at this point to spend time imagining horrible things. Okay. Because first of all, we don't know. We have 2 months to go. Okay. Like 2 months and 4 days to go until the inauguration. We don't know what's going to happen in that intervening time. We don't know what's going to happen with these nominations once the new Senate is seated the first week in January. And we also are in a place where any number of intervening events could take place between now and the inaugural. And I'm not going to speculate on what those are. I do have to remind you all that, the person who is currently the president-elect is not a well man. He has dementia. He's not physically well. There's like an enormous number of things that could happen between now and the inauguration itself. And so I just really want people to take a pause and truly understand that one of the ways in which you need to manage your emotional reactions right now is by not allowing yourself to kind of like sink into that pit. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel just said, need something positive. North Carolina saved Justice Allison Biggs during ballot carrying by 24 votes. That's insane. By the way, it looks like Michelle Steele's going to lose her seat in Orange County, California by like 59 votes or something like that right now. So there is some good news happening. And I'll just let you all also know something this morning. The latest count shows that Kamala came within 1.7% of Donald Trump. Okay. And they're still counting ballots. So, the idea that this is somehow a mandate or that it represents the will of the American people is false. This was all like very, very, very close and continues to be very, very close in some of these states. All right. I want everyone, when you find yourself spinning out, to recognize that hypervigilance, because that's what that is a form of a trauma response. All right. And it's not going to serve you well to spend time speculating about the worst next thing that's happening. All right. I forgot to do my intro. I'm ECM. I'm sitting here today in a camel colored cable knit sweater. I'm going to wave at all our friends here who are visually challenged. Sorry, it took me a while, you guys. My hair is down. I'm a pink skinned, green eyed, dirty, blonde haired woman. I look tired today. And I am in front of my oak cabinet and a stack of books. I bought a bookcase yesterday, you guys, by the way. It's coming this week. So before too long, the stack of books will not be there. And my plant. And I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohican land. Okay. So let's just talk for a second about these nominations, because I mentioned yesterday that it's a really good time to call your senators. Even if your senators are totally in the bag for MAGA, they need to hear from you. Because one of the things that I think people need to kind of be mindful about right now is that some of this is really trial balloon territory, right? As Trump did during the first administration, they are testing things to see whether or not there's going to be pushback. All right. And we are not helpless. I mean, again, I know that there is kind of like one of the things that's happening right now is a sort of fawn response, a kind of thing of like rolling over and playing dead. And I'm not suggesting that, I'm not calling anybody out, but like the possum strategy is also a trauma response, which is like, it's all over. We've lost. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket. What's the point? You need to make some phone calls, right? You also need to do all sorts of things to preserve your sanity, but you need to make some phone calls. And I think our senators need to hear from us at like really high levels over the next couple of weeks. All right. Even if it's Tim Scott and Lindsey Graham, you should call them and be mean. Call them and give them a piece of your mind. Call them and tell them that you're not going to stand for these insane nominations. Okay. Like, please don't neglect the ability to use your voice. Again, one of the things that I just want to also mention here, which I think people need to be thoughtful about, and this kind of jumps off of what C.A. Brown just said here, that some of this stuff is not trauma responses, but carefully crafted discord. I also need to point out something else here, okay? We are still in a disinformation war. It's shifted since the election, but people also need to be very aware that there's a lot of like rando trollish accounts showing up and being like, fuck it all, what's the point, right? That's another form of seeding despair. And I have to remind you all that despair is something that fascists count on, because what it means is that people do not resist. Okay. So again, if you're in a pit of despair and it's because you're reading things online, they're saying all hope is lost, you need to check out of like checking social media for a day or two. And you also need to kind of think through how despair is being manipulated right now, because it's real. Like, it's real. Okay. And that does not diminish from the fact that like what we're facing down is potentially devastating, right? But also we are not without power and we are not without resource. And so all of that is something that you need to keep in mind in terms of like where you're at. All right. Okay. So on the nominations, yes, call your senators. We do not know yet what's going to happen with the confirmation process. The latest is that Thune has said, as the Senate Majority Leader elect, so to speak, that now he's saying everything is on the table, which, they may consider to be recess appointments. I personally think there's like a legal issue here, and I'm not alone in this, because you're not supposed to be able to shove through an entire cabinet on recess appointments. And we'll have to see how that plays out. But the other thing that I just want to mention here is that there are indications that they're not using the traditional FBI vetting process. And that's because virtually everyone who's been nominated so far would not pass an FBI security clearance check. There are very limited exceptions to that. I think that Marco Rubio probably would pass one. I'm not really sure about anyone else. And that also is something that, just so people are aware, is extremely unusual. Now, is it illegal? Technically not, at least not from the research I've done. It's something that was sort of historically done traditionally since the FBI was founded. It is not something that is being done now. And I will remind you all that one of the things that's really dangerous about where we find ourselves is that, as happened with Jared Kushner in the first Trump administration, the president has unilateral authority to override a rejection of a security clearance. Like, essentially, the president can say, meh, you can have a security clearance, and you can have a security clearance, and you can have a security clearance, even if you're in the bag for Putin. And that's very dangerous, right? And I don't know what kind of pushback we're going to get on that either. I mean, it definitely is something to kind of be concerned about at this point. Okay. There were some questions this morning about like, what can we do to get through to people? What can we do better? And I just have to say something, speaking of disinformation and white male punditry, because the two, unfortunately, sometimes go hand in hand. All right. There's a lot of people out there with opinions. Okay. There's a lot of white male pundits who are like, they should have reached out more to white men. They should have reached out more to the white working class. And I'm just going to remind you all, because I know we've all memory hold it right now. That's basically what Tim Walz did for the entire campaign. Okay. Then there's people on the left, like Bernie Sanders, who were like, they didn't reach out to progressives. They didn't talk to people who were concerned about X, Y, and Z. Well, I'm first of all going to remind you that a lot of the anti-Gaza stuff was seeded disinformation. We knew that while it was happening. That's not a diminishment of what's happening in Gaza at all. But it was weaponized online to kind of convince people that Kamala Harris was a genocider. And Bernie's comments, I think, are bullshit. I'm swearing today. Sorry, you guys. But, I just have to say this. I think that anybody who's listening to that, saying that they didn't reach out to the progressive wing of the party, was absolutely not paying attention to all the meetings that Kamala Harris took with like the uncommitted movement, right? So there's a lot of like Monday morning quarterbacking happening here, and it's not helpful. Like, it's not helpful. All right. Now, I will tell you that I am at the moment very concerned about what's been happening on TikTok, as I was throughout the entire election cycle. There's even more stuff happening now, and there's a lot of anecdotal evidence coming out that young men were watching a lot of TikTok videos comparing Trump to Biden, comparing Trump to Kamala Harris in extremely derogatory terms, and that those folks who aren't getting their news from anywhere else may have been manipulated, let's just call it that, or had their internalized bias fired by the stuff that they were watching. All right. And that is an issue that we can consider going forward. But I'm also just going to say one other thing about this. Okay. Now is not the moment, literally less than 2 weeks since the election, for us to be saying, here's all the things that we need to fix next time. Okay. Because right now, what we have to be concerned about in this very short window of time is how we are going to prepare to save people's lives. I'm a hell of a lot less worried right now about how Democrats are going to message the midterms than I am about whether or not undocumented people in my own neighborhood are going to be rounded up and deported. All right. And so, yes, and Rachel's right. We have to, and I said this before here, but it's worth repeating. Micro-targeting is a part of the issue because the algorithms know us so well. They know what we follow. They know what we like. They know how much time our eyes are paying attention to certain topics. They know where we live. They know our gender. They know the kind of content that we historically engage in. They may know the name of our partner and whether or not our partner is, like male, female, non-binary, gender fluid. They may know our personal sexual orientation. There's all sorts of things that are known by the algorithms about us. And that makes the micro-targeting so much easier. We talked about Facebook advertising on the broadcast a couple of weeks ago. So the micro-targeting on this is extreme. And it literally allows information to be fired into the algorithm that is targeted directly to manipulate people based on their vulnerabilities. All right. It's extremely dangerous. All right. And I don't know what the answer is to it yet. I think that, good minds are thinking about it. But personally, at this moment, I'm in a place of being like more concerned about local organizing than I am about anything else. Okay. And I'm also just going to say something here, Michelle. There are people to stop him. Like, this is one of the things that again, this kind of stuff makes me mental right now. The idea that there is no one to stop him is a lie. That's a lie. Okay. Like, there's us. There's like the 72 million other people who voted for Kamala Harris, right? There's the ability for people like governors, state governors, local officials, local mobilizers to pull things together and like get things moving in the direction of disruption. Like, please don't roll over on this. 71 million people is not nothing, right? The question now is how we do the work of doing a form of disruption that isn't what it looked like historically. And I talked about this on the broadcast also yesterday, all right? Like, the things that everybody's thinking about, like, protests are not going to work in this administration. Like, I'm 100% with Kelly Hayes on this. Like, people will get shot and nothing will come of it. Okay. Like, the kind of organizing that we have to think about now. And again, it's worth going and doing some reading on this. Like, how we've all been calling ourselves the resistance, or we were, right? I kind of don't even like the moniker anymore. I've been like thinking about changing the name of the broadcast, but you know what they say about brand destruction. One of the things that I will just say here is that like the French resistance was not a protest movement. The French resistance was underground. Nobody knew who was in it. It was like micro-sized cells of people that helped to make sure that Jewish people were safe and that there were other means to disrupt what the Nazis were trying to do in Vichy France, right? They weren't out in the streets in like, a certain color of hat, right? Like, you have to think about this through the standpoint of what micro-targeted mobilization could do in response to what is coming, okay? And to me, I think that there is there is an enormous amount of despair, as we've already talked, playing upon the general public, but there's also an unwillingness to rethink what resistance looks like, right? I mean, I've been trying to signal this on the public broadcast. You know, part of this is like, it's a little bit dangerous to talk about this stuff publicly right now because we all have no idea what's coming down the pike for people who are out there talking about it. But seriously, you have to start rethinking what intervention looks like. Okay. And intervention is not necessarily loud. Like, I feel like I've said this so many times since the election, right? We have an opportunity here to mobilize where we live in very small groups in ways that are going to save people's lives. And that's really where it's at right now. Now, as we approach the midterms, may there be like some form of larger, like scaled mobilization in that direction? Of course. Okay. But like the thing now is about like, how do you organize where you live with people that you trust to make sure that people are safe? Right. Which, by the way, is why we're running like the dual power accelerator. I hope, like you guys can still join it. It starts like a week from Wednesday. And you should get in on it because it's the people in it already are amazing. Okay. So, I find it very troubling the way in which like people on the left right now are like, it's all over. All right. It's not all over. Right. I mean, like, when I think about the moments that have been faced down like this in history, this is the other thing I just want to mention, because I've been rereading Mariam Kaba and Kelly Hayes and Dean Spade and all these people who I like read during the pandemic, all of whom are like incredible mobilizers and organizers. And the 3.5% rule matters. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, the 3.5% rule is the rule that says if 3.5% of a given population organizes for change, whole societies can flip. 3.5%. That's it. There's actually been studies on this. Like the BBC has some information on it as well. But also this is something that's kind of talked about all over the place in Mariam Kaba's work and elsewhere. Like it really is not over. And the more that we, start thinking about novel ways to throw, as I keep saying, sand in the gears of what's coming, the more likely it's going to be that the things that they're planning are not going to succeed. Okay. And now is the time to start thinking about that. So like, here's another thing. Like there's all this reporting over the last 24 hours about like the mass deportation plans. And I'm just going to tell you guys something. Okay. They're not going to be able to carry this out unless people let them do it. All right. Like, I just have to say that, first of all, they're going to run out of money for deportations. Second of all, they're planning these like big camps. And I have questions about like whether or not they're even going to be able to like keep people in these camps if people kind of like find ways to disrupt that. Okay. And I don't think that I hope there's not going to be like kind of a mass tolerance for huge concentration camps all over America. George Takei, by the way, who was in a Japanese internment camp during World War II, wrote an incredible piece about this yesterday. About the fact that, 120,000 Japanese Americans were detained during World War II. And it altered the lives of those people forever. And the question is whether or not we're going to sit by and let that happen. Like, are we we're just going to let that happen? Because what are they going to do when they don't have any money to deport anybody anymore, let alone they don't know where to send anyone? Mexico apparently has said that if people get deported to Mexico, they're going to deport them back to us. So again, like you have to stop and I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to kind of like lecture and talk down to people today, but like, it's really important to stop thinking that this is all over. Okay. Because it's not. It's just that the battle is taking on a different form. And the adjustment to that is going to be a little bumpy. All right. But when I'm talking, and, I think part of this is that like people feel like they would feel better if there were people in the streets and there was a general strike and people were screaming down Pennsylvania Avenue, right? When in fact, the thing that's actually going to save lives is doing the thing that we've been talking about for the last 9 days, which is mobilizing where you live. Mobilize where you live. Mobilize locally with people that you care about. Make sure people are safe. Like that's the thing that's actually going to move the needle. All right. And, we'll have to see what happens after that. But that to me is like the highest priority at this moment in terms of like what to do next. And call your senators, of course, like we've already talked about. Okay. As for how news is going to get through, which was a question that somebody also asked this morning on the Patreon feed, keep in mind that most local news channels in this country right now are owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, or I think Comcast is the other major owner of all of those local news stations. Okay. That's not, it's a problem, but I'm going to tell you what the bigger problem is. There's a huge number of the American electorate that isn't getting any news from anywhere any longer. Like, they're watching TikTok, right? They're getting their news from Facebook. And those platforms are manipulated, and they're not reliable. And once somebody falls down an information superhole, so to speak, they don't get out. So we have much larger things to consider there in terms of that. It's not a messaging question. It's a disinformation question. And we'll have to see. Again, this is something that, again, we're not even 2 weeks out of the election. I think it's going to be a point of reflection for whatever's coming next. All right. But I don't think the answers are readily available just yet. Okay. Somebody asked a question. I think we've already covered enough about spiraling, like how to stop spiraling. You have to take action. You have to do something, even if it's just like making a phone call to a senator, or donating food to a local food bank, or having a conversation with a neighbor about what's going on. I'm just going to tell you right now, all the single moms on my block are organizing now. And we're organizing with our neighbors also, but we literally have text chains going every day. You should do something, because it will make you feel better. And also it will help to move the needle. And that includes, by the way, connecting locally with organizations that are already doing the work. Like, if your local Indivisible chapter is not all that active, seek out Red, White, and Blue. If that's not all that active, seek out your local LGBTQ support organization, right? Depending on the issues that you care about, maybe it's a Moms Demand chapter. All right. So don't give up. Don't give up in terms of finding the people and the organizations that you need to support right now. See, this is fantastic. You're cooking burritos for the homeless tomorrow. That's fantastic. That's something that actually is going to help people. And you're also going to meet people doing that who are going to be like-minded. All right. So that's that. Okay, Lights for Liberty. Let me just answer this question really quick. Lights for Liberty is not doing anything right now. I haven't been involved in it for a variety of reasons since the mobilization in 2019. I would not expect it to be revived, and I'll tell you why. Because one of the things that was very clear as the end of that whole thing came to pass is that despite the fact that I'm very proud of all the work that we did there, again, mass mobilizations don't matter to this administration, this incoming administration, or its historic precedent. They don't care, right? And this time around, they're going to shoot people. All right. So please, get involved where you live. And if you're concerned about immigration rights, get involved with an immigration rights organization, right? Get involved with an organization where you live that's serving migrants, maybe who have been bused illegally to where you live by DeSantis or, Texas or whomever, right? There are other ways to get involved. All right. Okay. Yeah, Leanne is right. It changes hard enough. If this is stepping into a completely unknown future and it's frightening to most people, we have to remember there are things we can still control. That's right. And all of them are local to you. So that's where you should start. Okay. All right. Let's see what else. Somebody asked a question about how to talk to your kids about this stuff. This is really an individual choice. In my house, it's hard to avoid because my kids know what I do for work, and they know that I'm broadcasting right now, and they hear me talking about this stuff all the time. I've chosen to be about as honest as I can be, although there are certain things that I just don't feel are age appropriate to talk about. They don't really know about the Matt Gaetz allegations, because that to me is just a line too far. They know that he's somebody who's been accused of rape. That's kind of it. So, and we have conversations a lot of the time about safety and our personal safety and how I'm keeping us safe. But there are just certain things. There's no point in terrorizing our kids right now beyond what they already know. I'm kind of an open book. So any question they ask me, I'm going to answer as honestly as I can. But I do want to remind people that our kids are fragile, and it's not a good idea to just terrify them. When we were living in California, my kids knew ICE, and they knew what their uniforms were, and they knew what to do if ICE raided their school, and if they took away their friends, right? Because we definitely had some undocumented friends in that area. And we did various things while we were there, like folks who I knew had keys to my house in case they ever needed to come. There are various things that you can do in that regard. I don't know what that's going to look like for us here now, but, I've talked to my kids a little bit about what's going on. And, my kids obviously know that Trump won and that was devastating for them. So we have to try to work through making it as calm and peaceful for them as possible. That for me has meant like, I'm the source of stability in the house. Although, I will freely admit that it's hard sometimes to be that when you're dysregulated yourself. I try as hard as I can. Some days I'm more stressed than others. But then I take all of my conversations and my fears and my concerns and my worries about this to other adults. And those conversations are in confidence and they're only with people that I really, really trust. So that's kind of my recommendation there. You do have to evaluate it on an age basis and on, in terms of what you think your kids can handle. Okay. Somebody asked about the makeup of the House and the Senate. The Senate is definitely in Republican hands. It looks like the House is going to go that way, but by the slimmest of slim margins. All right. And we all know what that looked like the last time in the House. So I've said this many times this week, I would not rely on the House to be the most functional body right now. Unfortunately, only a simple majority of senators is needed to confirm nominees. There has been a lot of reporting since last night that Matt Gaetz doesn't even have 50% of the Senate Republican caucus. So we'll see whether or not that sticks. But that's kind of where we are right now on the makeup of it. Okay. We had a question about domestic violence being on the rise. There's a couple of people, unfortunately, in our Patreon community who have had domestic violence experience in the last few days. I'm just going to say this. I think that Trump has allowed people to act on their worst impulses. And just in the same way that Super Bowl Sunday is a moment where, there's a lot more incidents of domestic violence. I think the election is one that has sort of like propelled, a sense of entitlement to violence in, at any time, honestly. But I think that that's a real concern. I'm just going to say to everybody, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is there. Please use it if you need it. All right. And please talk to a lawyer if you need to. Don't forget that you can call your local domestic violence shelters. You can get help there. We have people in this community who have had to live in domestic violence shelters for certain windows of time. Please just don't hesitate to use the resources that are there. Yes, Sherrod Brown can run for J.D. Vance's seat. We'll see what happens with that. Okay, but there will be an appointment because don't forget that usually the way that it works, it depends on the state. But usually the way that it works is there are special elections for the House of Representatives when those seats are vacated. And then usually in the Senate, governors appoint a senator to fulfill the term. Okay. There was some confusion about Gaetz's resignation. He did resign from this House term. He has been elected for the next House term. Yes, it could technically mean that he is going to take the oath of office on January 3rd and stay in the House. However, he has signaled that he's not planning on doing that because then the ethics investigation will be revived and he really doesn't want anybody to know what's in this report. It's really bad, by the way, you guys. Like, not only has the 17-year-old who he raped given testimony to the House Ethics Committee, but there was another young woman who witnessed him having sex with this 17-year-old, and who has testified to the committee. So the report is going to be really bad. Like, we know that. And he doesn't want that out in the public domain at all. So I don't think he's coming back to Congress either way. But again, we'll have to see how that goes. Okay. Somebody asked me about backstops to the future. Well, look, we don't, again, I have to repeat to everybody, like, we don't know what's going to happen next, right? We really don't. I will tell you that again, as I've said many times this week, I'm looking at the Democratic governors, but also, the ACLU is out there with an incredible litigation team. They're going to be in court nonstop. Mark Elias on voting rights related issues, I'm sure will be out there doing his part. Again, I will just remind everybody that Human Rights Campaign is one of the nation's top organizations for the LGBTQ community. There's the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. There are a number of other legal organizations based on identity that are good ones to support. I will just say this, though, like, I do not recommend right now donating to the DNC. They did an enormous amount of fundraising during this cycle, and they don't really need the money right now for any reason. All right. Southern Poverty Law Center is fine. I'm just going to tell you, though, their work is much more kind of like gathering information on hate groups. than engaging in litigation. So they will be a kind of clearinghouse of information. They are not as active, even though their name is like Southern Poverty Law Center. They're not as active in court as some of these other organizations are. Particularly since Morris Dees was booted out for misconduct. So, just keep an eye on that. All right. The reason why, at least from what we know, to answer your question, Debbie, the reason why he hasn't been charged with rape, Matt Gaetz, is because apparently she was like 17 3/4 when the event went down. And so there was a judgment call made using prosecutorial discretion at the time that it was probably not worth the trial. Now, I don't know. That's a rumor. I don't know for sure that that's true. The question I have is whether or not the statute of limitations has run, but keep in mind that because this involves sex trafficking over state lines, it would be a federal case prosecuted by a U.S. attorney's office under the purview of the DOJ. So it's not going anywhere right now because he, of course, would be the attorney general in charge of it if he succeeds on the nomination. You guys plugging for Surge. Okay. Surge is fine. I don't want to knock Surge, but I'm just going to say something. Okay. The last few mobilizing calls that I've been on for Surge have actually been much more fundraising than mobilization based. I actually was very disappointed in one that I attended leading up to the election. Because it wasn't even educational. It was really just an hour-long ad for Surge. And it didn't really provide very much substance. So, you have to make your own evaluations of, where you want to spend your money and where you want to spend your time. I just was really not impressed with what they were doing in terms of like the Harris campaign as compared to other interest groups and organizations. So that's just my 2 cents. Okay. Final topic, which is a big one, which I promised you all would talk about today, is like prepperism. And I'm always really kind of like loath to talk about it in those terms because I'm not a prepper. I have not historically been a prepper, but I did do some things during the pandemic that, I think are very relevant in terms of how we're thinking about what's coming. Okay, stop. Suzanne, the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee have been confirming judges nonstop since the election. Nonstop. Like they've pushed a ton of people through since 2 weeks ago. So I don't know who's telling you he's not taking steps to get more judges in. They're doing it. Okay. This is one reason why we have to be really careful, right? Because there's a lot of things like, why isn't Biden doing this? Why isn't Biden doing that? Why is, blah, why aren't the Democrats doing this? Well, some things they are doing and some things they can't do. Okay. So just please be very cautious about where you're laying blame right now, because, this is the other thing I want people to understand. There are certain things that arguably could be done. Most of them would be instantly reversible by Trump if they were tried. Okay. So, just understand that I think Biden is acting in large part in furtherance of like the statesmanship of democracy in the choices that he's making right now. And P.S., they know what's coming down the pike. Like they really do. I don't think anybody has any doubts. You can't see a nomination of like Pete Hegseth to run the DOD and Matt Gaetz for Attorney General and not understand what's coming down the pike. All right. And I'm sure if there are things that they can do, they will undertake them. Okay. Back to our kind of prepper conversation. So look, the things that I am the most concerned about right now are I would say like twofold. One is what's going to happen to food production in this country if and when there really is a mass deportation, because so much of our food production, this if you follow United Farm Workers, is migrant undocumented labor. All right. And if seriously what they do is go through whole communities and round people up and put them in camps or deport them, there's not going to be anyone to do food production out of our fields, right? And that is an extremely worrying potential development. So, I have had a debate about getting like, we don't have really have room for it here. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this, but, getting another small freezer, right? And making sure that I've got frozen vegetables and fruit and, whatever else we might want to have to eat available, right? I've thought about doing some of that. Yes, meat packing is also done by migrants, like nonstop. Anybody who's been to the Delmarva Peninsula knows this, all right? Like all of Purdue Farms runs on migrant, largely undocumented labor. It's incredible. And, I know there are people out there speculating about labor camps. Can we just put a pause on that for a second? Because let me just say something, all right? That too is something that is rank speculation about what's coming, okay? I want you to think about what it would take from a nationwide organizing standpoint to round up undocumented people and then force them back into the fields they were working in the first place. Think about like the degree of local enforcement that would require. All right. I don't think that's possible. I'll just tell you right now, it may be possible at some point, but I don't think that's possible now. All right. What you're describing is a sort of legalized form of slavery. And I think we've got to be very thoughtful about the way in which this speculation goes on. Which big ag companies are you talking about? Like, again, I have to remind people here that like, this is a thing that needs to be said today. All right. The blame for all of this, should it come to pass, which is a big if, lies nowhere but at the feet of Donald Trump and his people. Okay. Stop blaming Democrats. Stop blaming corporations for not doing enough, right? I'm sure they're concerned, okay? Big Pharma took a plummet yesterday when RFK Jr. had been announced, all right? It's not like they don't also see what's coming, okay? So let me just do this. Yes, I know the South uses prison labor. I mean, Alabama is kind of notorious for it. But let me just say one other thing, though. That's small scale, Rachel, right? That's not 11 million people being put in camps and then forced to work fields. So, one of the things that again is like is key to think about here is what are they actually going to be able to achieve? What are they actually going to be able to achieve? And when? Because the when is a big question. So is if. All right. So, just to return to the original topic, I am thinking about like getting a small freezer and, doing the things I did during the pandemic, which is like, get on a CSA that shows up at my door every week with vegetables. We also have an amazing farmers market here where I like know all the people down there already. And that runs year round. I would strongly encourage you, if you live in a place that has a farmers market, to get engaged there with like your local farmers, because that'll matter. But I also am thinking about things related to like medicine. And this is one reason why I took my dogs this morning to get their rabies boosters early, because that one of the things that is under control of Health and Human Services and the FDA is pet meds, right? Just the same way vaccines are. All right. And so please make sure that, you are doing, I said this earlier this week, but it really matters, that you are doing everything you need to do right now in terms of medical appointments before RFK Jr. is in charge of HHS, okay? By the way, if you're concerned at all about H5N1, bird flu, go get your flu shot. If you haven't had it yet this year, go get your flu shot, go get your COVID booster, like get it all done. Get your shingles vax. Yes, I mean, I've been recommending that to everyone. It's really not that bad. Just please make sure that you're doing everything that you need to do in terms of what could be lost for your own well-being. All right. And, the other thing that I will just say here is that if you have any preventative procedures that you need to get done, I would think about getting those done too, especially if you are on Obamacare. I am thinking, we're on the ACA right now. I'm thinking about switching to a more traditional health plan outside of the marketplace, which is probably going to double our health insurance costs, but it would mean that we're not going to lose coverage, right? And so if you have the ability to do that, you might want to think about that also. Just to get back to the food question for a second, again, I want you to think about, and also this relates to medicine. Think about the things that you did during the pandemic, right? Like one of the things that we did was we had a really robust medical kit at home. We also planted a garden, right? I wasn't very good at it, but we did plant a garden the first summer of the pandemic, and we grew all sorts of things like zucchini and tomatoes and squash and all sorts of things. And you can think about that too. Please keep in mind that they're already talking about making mifepristone a class A drug, which means it's not going to be able to be sent through the mail anymore. So if anybody you know around you has the capacity to get pregnant, it's a good time to stock up on Plan B. Also, stock up on birth control, or go get permanent birth control, or go get a tubal ligation if that's something that you want. Or if you're a man, you can go get a vasectomy. None of these are bad things to do. All right now. And again, the silver lining to all of this is that a lot of us knew how to do this kind of stuff because of the pandemic, and the procedures for thinking through how to get ready for this are very much the same. Now, my hope, of course, is that I'm not going to need to use the 10 tubes of fluoride toothpaste. I mean, eventually we'll get through them, but this is something else I did. I stocked up on fluoride toothpaste because of my kids. I hope we're not going to have to worry about fluoride being taken out of the water, but I want to be ready, in the event that there's some effort to do that. And so you can buy Plan B from Amazon. You can buy it online. You can buy it anywhere. You can go walk into your drugstore and get it. I have 2 doses of it here in my house that I ordered last week. I have no need for them any longer myself, but someone may. And I want to be the person who has those available. So, again, these are all things to kind of be thinking about right now. All right. Just one other thought on this right now, because I really do want people to recognize that even though we don't know what's coming, there are going to be a lot of very vulnerable people if and when some of this stuff is carried out. I have concerns about Social Security. I have concerns about Medicare. I have concerns about what they're going to do to try to make rich people even richer. And by the way, I should just mention this, please know that pharma doesn't make a huge amount of money on vaccination. So this thing of pharma's not going to let this happen is a big question mark, because pharma makes a lot more money off of sick people than off of healthy people. And again, so just I think there's a balance that will be struck here, and we'll have to see. Okay. Fluoride mouthwash is also a good thing to kind of invest in if you have kids right now too. So where was I? Yes. Okay. So think about the vulnerable people near you where you live. What's going to happen to the elders in your community if they lose Medicare or they lose Social Security? How's the local community organizing that you're going to do benefit them? This is where food banks come into play. I made huge donations to food banks. I did a huge fundraiser for the LA County Food Bank during the pandemic. I think we raised $10,000 or something like that. You can think about doing that kind of work. Okay. And again, every little bit is going to help. Okay. Med kit. So, Leslie Mack's med kit was the one that I used during COVID. I don't know. You can Google it and see it. Maybe it'll come up under Leslie Mack, MAC. Her medical kit was really solid, and, has everything from super glue to kind of ace bandages to blood clotting pads, if you get cut at home, all sorts of things in there that are helpful. And I don't know if I have the list anywhere myself right now, but I'll have a look. Also, with the potential of H5N1 coming into play, masks, make sure you have a stock of masks on hand. Yes, thank you, Ron. I was thinking the same thing. Hand sanitizer, good thing to have around. And let's keep in mind as well that, if we do have an anti-vax guy running the HHS and there's another pandemic, who the hell knows? I guess nobody gets vaccines and the whole thing gets fixed, as someone said this morning, with herbal tea. So, making sure that you're prepared for all of that is critically important. Yeah. Benadryl, aspirin, Band-Aids of various sizes. We have Mylicon, children's Mylicon. I'm stocked up on cold and flu medicine. I'm stocked up on children's Tylenol. We have a huge quantity of Advil. I'm just thinking about what's in the kit in my closet. We have those surgical scissors for cutting bandages. We have ACE bandages in various sizes. What else is in there? We have eye wash in case you happen to get something into your eyes. We have I'm going to forget the name of it, the disinfectant stuff that that turns your skin red. Can't remember what it's called. We have that. What else is in there? What else? We have butterfly closures, super glue to seal wounds, like I said, thermometer. We have a pulse ox, betadine. Yes, that's what it is. Just all sorts of stuff like that. I can even go through my kit and make the list of what I've got. But again, what you want to think about is what are you going to do if there's an accident in your home, right? Aloe also is really good for burns. Don't forget. There's all sorts of things here that could be helpful. So, yeah, I know it's no fun to think about these things, but it's a good time to do it anyway. And, the last thing I'll just say about this is I am attending a seminar this week on the issue of safety for activists in light of what's coming. And if I learn anything in that I think is helpful to the community, I will definitely share it. I will say that I've already mentioned this. I'm a big fan of Delete Me, because it wipes all your public information off, those consolidator white pages type sites on the internet. Yeah. And, there are other things to think about there too, in terms of personal safety, but I think that some of them really depend on, where you are in terms of your public profile. So, yeah. I think that's it for now, you guys. All right. So, you guys should join the Dual Power Accelerator, because we're going to be talking about this and a lot more in there, including mobilizing for survival, mobilizing for safety, mobilizing for disruption, and a whole bunch of other topics. We're going to talk about setting boundaries to keep yourself safe. We're going to talk about emotional responses to what's happening. It's, the course is going to be great. So I hope you will consider joining us. Again, the link is below, GaiaLeadershipProject.com/dual-power-accelerator. I can also drop a link up here when we're done. And I think I'll drop it into the comments below here as well, just in case you guys want it. And I think that's it. And I'll see you guys on Monday. I'm going to try to chill out the rest of the weekend. I actually think I might take a social media break before too long, because I just am feeling so overwhelmed right now by where we're at. And the onslaught is a lot. So I'll let you guys know if I'm going to do that. I don't think you need to worry about toilet paper, but who knows? On when will you hear if we got a scholarship? So let me just let you guys know something. We're still holding scholarship applications open, but we got a massive amount of scholarship applications for this program. I was going through the spreadsheet the other day, just looking at the numbers, and they're huge. And this is kind of tricky for us because we want to make sure that the program itself is the experience that we set out to make it. And also we definitely have people who applied for scholarships who have received as many as 4 from us in the past. And also we have to make an evaluation of the various components of our numbers, right? Because we sort of have Britt's really trying. I'm the person who just wants to let a lot of people in. And Britt has been saying to me, especially since our last program where we were kind of overwhelmed, that from a staffing and a quality of programming perspective, we're going to have to be a little bit more restrictive this time around than we may have been historically. She's trying to hold me to a tight number. And it's right, because, frankly, one of the things that happens when we let a lot of people in on scholarship who have not taken courses with us before is that we end up with a lot more customer service that we have to do. So we've handed out a bunch of partial scholarships now. Some of you are here today. I know you guys know, because we notified a bunch of people late in the week. And we've notified a few full scholarship people that were just, very, very obviously met every single criteria, and were folks who were already doing significant mobilization work where they lived. And, we can see how the program is really going to help them to kind of launch to the next level for what's coming. But we'll be evaluating all of that further. And frankly, I'll just let you guys know that, we may not get final decisions out until the day before the program starts. Because the numbers are so big and it's an enormous amount of work to vet people. So just stay tuned, and, we'll let you know one way or another. All right. Okay. Have a great, Britt is right. I mean, she keeps me in line. She doesn't want me to burn out, and I appreciate that. She doesn't want to burn herself out either, or other people on the team. So, she's really good at holding boundaries in that regard. All right, you guys, have a good rest of your weekend. Lots of love to all of you. And I will catch you all here on Monday. Please try to do something this weekend that feeds your soul. All right. I'll see you soon. Bye.